The rain that night didn't just fall, it felt like an attack. It hammered against the cracked pavement of the city streets, turning the potholes into deep, dirty puddles of oil and freezing water. I stood shivering under the broken plastic shelter of the bus stop, wrapping my arms tightly around my chest. My name is Amara. I am 25 years old, and tonight, I felt every single year pressing down on me. I looked down at my dark green nurse scrubs, the uniform that was supposed to command respect, but tonight just felt like a thin layer of paper against the biting wind. The fabric clung to my brown skin, damp and cold, making me shake uncontrollably. My shift at the hospital had ended over 2 hours ago. I should have been home, warm in my bed. But the hospital was understaffed, and the paperwork had piled up. I stayed to finish it unpaid, because that is what you do when you care too much and earn too little. Now, the storm was punishing me for my dedication. I looked down at my white sneakers, bargain bin shoes I had bought months ago. They were soaked through, gray with street muck, and I could feel the icy water seeping into my socks. It was a misery that felt personal, like the world was laughing at me. Every car that drove past splashed dirty mist into the air. I flinched with every pass, trying to shrink back into the shadows. I felt small. I felt invisible. A notification lit up my phone screen, glowing bright in the gloom. It was my bank app, telling me I was overdrawn again. The rent was late, and my landlord was done listening to my apologies. A heavy exhaustion settled deep in my bones. It wasn't just that my feet hurt from a 12-hour shift. It was a soul-deep tiredness. I was running a race I could never win. I closed my eyes, listening to the rain, wondering if I had the strength to walk the 3 miles home because the bus was nowhere to be seen. Suddenly, headlights cut through the curtain of rain. They were sharp and blinding, slowing down as they got close to the curb. My stomach tightened. I expected a taxi I couldn't afford, or worse, some creep slowing down to harass a woman alone in a storm. But the car that stopped wasn't a taxi, and it wasn't a beat-up sedan. It was a long, black car, sleek and terrifyingly clean. It looked like a shark swimming through the water. It was a machine of power dressed up in luxury. The back window rolled down with a quiet electronic hum. Inside, the car glowed with a warm, amber light. I stepped back, my heart pounding a warning beat against my ribs. My hand went up to clutch the ID badge on my scrub top, as if my name and my job could somehow protect me. The man in the back seat was sitting in the shadows. I could only see the sharp line of his jaw and the crisp, high collar of a white shirt. He didn't look at me at first. He stared straight ahead, still as a statue. He radiated a kind of calmness that felt more dangerous than the storm outside. When he finally turned his head, he moved slowly. His eyes were dark, deep, and devoid of the frantic energy of the city. He didn't smile. He didn't look at me with lust. He looked at me like he was an appraiser looking at a broken piece of art. "You will catch pneumonia," he said. His voice was deep, a low rumble that cut right through the noise of the rain. It wasn't a question. It wasn't really an invitation. It was just a fact. "Get in." I hesitated. My survival instinct was screaming at me to run, but my reality was crushing me. I was freezing, I had no money, and I was exhausted beyond reason. "I can't," I stammered. My voice sounded weak and thin. "I don't have money for a ride, sir. And I don't know who you are." The man shifted slightly. The leather seat creaked, a sound of expensive quality that I wasn't used to hearing. "I didn't ask for your money, Amara," he said. He used my name. A chill that had nothing to do with the rain shot down my spine. He must have seen my badge, I told myself. That was the only explanation. "And you don't need to know me to know that you won't survive the walk home tonight," he continued. The door clicked and swung open. Warmth flooded out, smelling of expensive leather and heat. It felt like a trap. I knew it was a trap, but the cold was eating me alive. That warmth was calling to me like a siren song. My legs moved before my brain could stop them. If this was how I disappeared, at least I would be warm for a few minutes. I ducked my head and slid into the car. The heavy door thudded shut behind me, sealing out the rain, the noise, and the miserable world I lived in. The silence inside the car was absolute. It was a pressurized bubble of luxury. It smelled of ozone and a faint, woodsy cologne that was sharp and intoxicating. I pressed myself against the door, trying to take up as little space as possible. I was terrified of dripping rainwater onto the pristine seats. The driver, a silhouette behind a partition, pulled the car away from the curb so smoothly I barely felt it move. I glanced at the man beside me. Up close, he was devastatingly handsome, but in a severe, intimidating way. He had high cheekbones and hair as black as ink that fell slightly over his forehead. He was wearing a perfectly tailored black suit that looked like it cost more than my entire life's earnings, paired with a crisp white shirt. He looked to be in his early 30s, but his eyes held the weight of an old soul. He was looking at a tablet, swiping across the screen, ignoring my shivering form entirely. "Where are we going?" I asked, my voice trembling. I tried to sound tough, but I failed. "My apartment is the other way. You need to turn around." He didn't look up. He didn't even blink. "Your apartment has no heat," he said. His tone was casual, as if we were discussing the weather. "The landlord turned it off yesterday. The lock on your front door is broken, and your neighborhood has had 3 break-ins this week. Taking you there would be negligent." Panic flared hot and bright in my chest. "Who are you?" I demanded. I reached for the door handle, but it was locked. "Let me out. Right now." Finally, he set the tablet down and turned to face me fully. The intensity of his gaze pinned me to the seat. "My name is Junho," he said, speaking clearly. "And you are not a prisoner, Amara. You are a guest who needs help. You save lives every day at the hospital, yet you cannot seem to save your own. Consider this divine intervention." There was no mockery in his voice, only a strange curiosity. He reached into a small cooler built into the console and pulled out a bottle of water, handing it to me.
"Drink."
"You are dehydrated." I stared at the bottle, then at him. The fear was still there, pulsing in my throat, but beneath it was a strange tiredness. The heat of the car was soaking into my frozen limbs, making my eyelids heavy. I took the water. My fingers brushed against his. His skin was cool, dry, and firm. I opened the bottle and drank, the cool liquid soothing my throat. "Why me?" I whispered. The fight was draining out of me as the exhaustion of the double shift crashed down. There are thousands of nurses in this city.
"Juno watched me."
His expression was unreadable as he looked at the dark circles under my eyes. "Because you are the only one who stopped to help the man in the alley 3 weeks ago," he said softly. "The one with the stab wound everyone else stepped over. You ruined your uniform that night. You missed your bus. You stitched him up with a travel kit and called an ambulance, knowing you wouldn't get paid, knowing it would make you late." My memory flickered back to that night. A bloody, rainy night. A groan from the shadows. The instinct to kneel in the mud and help. I hadn't thought anyone had seen that. "He survived," Junho continued. His voice dropped, becoming lower, almost intimate. "He is one of my best men. He is valuable to me. Therefore, you are valuable to me." The logic was twisted, old-fashioned, and terrifying. The hum of the engine and the warmth of the car were pulling me under. My head dipped, my vision blurring. I tried to stay awake, to fight the darkness, but my body betrayed me. The last thing I felt was the car turning onto a highway, leaving the city lights behind, and the weight of Junho's gaze resting on me as I slipped into sleep. Waking up was a slow, confusing process. I felt like I was floating in a cloud. It was nothing like the lumpy mattress with the poking spring I had left behind that morning. I opened my eyes, blinking against the soft light coming through sheer curtains. I was lying in a bed that could have fit my entire apartment. The sheets were snowy white and smelled of lavender. For a moment, I thought I had died. This was too clean, too quiet, too peaceful to be my life. Then, the memory of the rain and the black car crashed back into my mind. I sat up with a gasp, my heart hammering. I looked down at myself. My damp, filthy green scrubs were gone. In their place, I was wearing a silk pajama set in a pale, shimmering champagne color. The fabric slid against my beautiful brown skin like water. Panic flooded my veins. Someone had undressed me. Someone had touched me while I was unconscious. I scrambled backward, pressing my spine against the velvet headboard, pulling the blanket up to my chin. I scanned the room. It was huge. The ceilings were high. The walls painted a calming blue. The furniture was dark wood, heavy and antique. There were no bars on the windows, but when I ran to the floor-to-ceiling glass, the view confirmed my fear. I was high up, looking down over a massive estate. Green lawns stretched out toward a thick forest. In the distance, a high stone wall topped with security cameras and iron spikes circled the property. The rain had stopped, but the beauty of the morning felt threatening. I was nowhere near the city. I was in a fortress. I turned back to the room.
My clothes were gone.
My phone was missing. On the bedside table, there was a glass of water and a single white orchid on a silver tray. It felt like a taunt. I needed to get out. I moved toward the heavy double doors, my bare feet sinking into the plush carpet. I reached for the handle, expecting it to be locked. To my surprise, the handle turned. The door swung open silently. I stepped out into a hallway that stretched out in both directions, wide and silent. "Hello," I called out. My voice was swallowed by the size of the house. "Is anyone there?" Silence was my only answer. I walked cautiously, finding a grand staircase. I walked down, my heart beating fast. The house was like a museum.
No dust, no clutter. Perfect and dead.
At the bottom of the stairs, a woman appeared. She was older, Korean, wearing a severe black dress with a white apron. Her hair was in a tight bun, her face blank. "Good morning, Miss Amara," she said.
Her voice was dry.
"I trust you slept well. The master said not to disturb you." I froze. "Who are you?" I asked. "Where are my clothes? Why am I here?" The woman clasped her hands. "I am Mrs. Choi, the housekeeper. Your clothes have been washed, though they were quite damaged. As for why you are here, you must ask Mr. Kim. He is waiting in the dining room." "I want to leave," I said, my voice rising. "I want a taxi." Mrs. Choi looked at me with a flicker of pity. "There are no taxis here, Mississippi, and the gates are locked for your protection. You should eat. You look pale." She walked away, leaving me alone. Anger began to replace my fear. I marched toward the doors she had pointed to and shoved them open. The dining room was bathed in morning light. A long mahogany table stretched out before me. At the far end, seated with his back to a massive window, was Junho. He was dressed in a charcoal suit today, perfectly tailored, with a fresh, white shirt. He looked up as I entered. His expression was calm. "Amara," he said, nodding to an empty chair.
"Please, sit."
I didn't move. I stood in the doorway, fists clenched. The silk pajamas felt like a costume. "I'm not hungry," I snapped. "I want to go home. You have no right to keep me here. This is kidnapping." Junho stood up. His movement was smooth and predatory. He walked toward me. The room felt suddenly smaller. He stopped a few feet away. I could smell that same woodsy cologne. "Kidnapping implies I want a ransom or I want to hurt you," he said quietly. "I have neither. I brought you here because the alternative was watching you freeze on a street corner." "You are angry," he observed. "Good. Anger is better than despair. It means you have fight left in you." He gestured to the window. "Look at the gate, Amara. Really look at it." I followed his gaze. Through the glass, I could see two men standing by the iron gates. They were wearing dark suits and holding assault rifles. My breath hitched. "Who are you?" I whispered. "I am a Korean Mafia boss," Junho replied. He said the words clearly, owning the title. "I am a man with many enemies. And because you saved one of my lieutenants, you have placed yourself on a chessboard you do not understand. My enemies know who you are. They know you helped the Korean Mafia. If I send you back to that apartment with your broken lock, you will be dead within the week. They will use you to get to me." He paused, letting the weight of his words settle on me. "You are not a prisoner, Amara. You are a refugee. And until I say it is safe, you belong to this house." The finality in his tone struck me hard. He wasn't asking. He was telling me my new reality. I looked at his face, searching for a lie, but found only a terrifying resolve. I was trapped by a debt I didn't know I owed, held by a mafia boss who looked at me not as a woman, but as a strategic asset. Sit, he said again, softer this time.
Eat.
We have much to discuss. The days that followed blurred together. It was a suffocating loop of luxury. I was a bird in a golden cage. I could go to the library or the garden, but never beyond the heavy iron gates. I rarely saw Junho during the day. He disappeared into the West Wing, guarded by silent men in suits. But the evenings were different. The evenings belonged to dinner. Mrs. Choi would lay out a dress for me. Always elegant, always expensive. I would dress, feeling the silk reshape me from a tired nurse into something ornamental. We would eat at the long table. The silence was thick. He would ask about my childhood, my studies, the patience I had lost. He listened with an intensity that made me feel exposed. On the fifth night, I couldn't sleep. I wandered into the library. The room was dark, lined with thousands of books. A fire crackled in the fireplace. I thought I was alone until I saw him by the window. He held a glass of amber liquid. He had taken off his suit jacket. His white shirt was unbuttoned at the collar, sleeves rolled up to show strong forearms. It was the first time I had seen the mafia boss look like a human being. Insomnia is common when you are displaced, he said without turning around. Or is it a guilty conscience, Amara? I stepped into the room. I have nothing to be guilty about, I replied. I'm not the one holding people against their will. Junho turned. The firelight caught the sharp angles of his face. He looked weary. He took a sip of his drink, his eyes traveling over me. I was wearing a silk robe he had provided. You are not a prisoner, he corrected softly, walking toward me. You are being preserved. There is a difference. Value. I repeated bitterly. You talk about me like I'm an asset, like that orchid upstairs. Junho set his glass down. He closed the distance between us. The air in the room felt heavy with electricity. He reached out, his fingers grazing my cheek. I flinched, not from fear, but from the shock of his touch. The orchid is decorative, he murmured. His voice was a low rumble. You are something else. You have seen blood and death, yet you still look at the world with kindness. That is rare in my life, Amara. It is dangerous, and it is captivating. I couldn't move. I was trapped in his gaze. What do you want from me? I whispered. He looked at my lips, then back to my eyes. Tonight, he said, stepping back, I just want you to sit with me. The silence in this house is loud, and I am tired of listening to it alone. The fragile peace was shattered 2 nights later. I was in my room when the estate's alarms began to scream. The lights flickered and died, plunging the room into darkness. Panic seized my throat. I heard shouting, heavy boots, and the terrifying crack of gunfire from the grounds below. My breath came in short gasps. The enemies he spoke of had come. I waited for the door to burst open, for rough hands to grab me. Instead, the door flew open and a beam of light cut through the dark. It was Junho. He held a handgun with a flashlight attached. He was breathing hard. His white shirt was torn at the shoulder, and a dark stain of blood was spreading across the fabric. Amara, he barked. Get down. Away from the windows. He crossed the room in 3 strides, grabbing my arm. He pulled me away from the glass and shoved me into the bathroom. Stay here, he ordered. Do not open this door for anyone but me. Do you understand? I looked at the blood on his shirt. The nurse and me took over. You're bleeding, I said, reaching for him. Junho, you're hurt. He caught my wrists. His adrenaline was high, radiating a scary energy. It's a graze, he said tightly. A warning shot. My men are handling it. You are the target, Amara. They know you are here. The reality hit me like a punch. Why? I choked out. Why didn't you let me go? Junho looked at me then, the mask of the mafia boss slipping. He cupped my face with his hand, his thumb wiping away a tear I didn't know had fallen. Because, he whispered, I couldn't trust anyone else to keep you alive. And I couldn't bear the thought of you dying in the gutter, where I found you. The gunfire stopped outside. He leaned his forehead against mine for a second. In the chaos, there was only the heat of his skin. Lock the door, he commanded, pulling away, and pray that I come back to unlock it. He slammed the door, and I heard the lock click. I was alone in the dark, praying not for my escape, but for the survival of the Korean Mafia boss who had captured me. It was 3 hours before he came back. He had showered and changed into black slacks and a black turtleneck. He looked exhausted. He found me in the kitchen. I had a first aid kit on the counter. I pointed to a bar stool.
Sit, you ordered?
My voice was steady. He looked at me with a flicker of amusement and obeyed. It is merely a scratch, he protested. I pushed up his sleeve. It wasn't a scratch. It was a jagged cut, angry and red. You need stitches, I said. I can do it here. Unless you want a hospital? He laughed, a dark sound. Hospitals ask questions, Amara. Stitch it. I worked in silence. I cleaned the wound and numbed it. I could feel his eyes on me. My brown fingers brushed against his pale skin, and every touch sent a jolt through me. When I finished, I cut the thread. I didn't move away. I stood between his knees, my hands on his uninjured shoulder. Who were they? I asked. Rivals, he answered. Men who want my territory. They think taking you will weaken me. He looked up at me, his hands coming to rest on my waist. They are wrong. You are not a distraction, Amara. You are. Grounding. When the bullets were flying, I wasn't thinking about my empire. I was thinking about whether your door was thick enough. The admission hung in the air. I looked down at this powerful, dangerous man. I saw the violence, but I also saw the protection. God help me, I wanted to stay. I wanted to be the reason he survived. I'm not leaving, I whispered. His grip on my waist tightened. You should, he rasped. You should run while you can. But if you stay, there is no going back. The next morning, the sun rose as if nothing had happened. But the shattered window in the hall was proof of the violence. Junho found me in the conservatory, staring at the orchids. He held a manila envelope. He extended it to me without a word. I opened it. Inside was a passport with my photo, but a different name, a bank book with a huge balance, and a plane ticket to Zurich, leaving tonight. The threat is gone for now, he said. His voice was flat and professional, but it will return. This is your exit, Amara. A new identity, a new life. Anywhere but here. You will never have to work a double shift again. You will never be cold. It was everything I had dreamed of at that bus stop. Safety, security, freedom from poverty. I looked at the ticket. Then I looked at him. He was standing with his hands behind his back, refusing to look at me. He was letting me go. He was giving me the choice. And if I take this? I asked. What happens to you? A muscle twitched in his jaw. I continue, he said. I go back to the way things were before I saw you in the rain. Cold. Efficient. Alone. The word hung there. Alone. I looked at the papers.
It was a safe life.
But it was a life without the fire I had found in his library. It was a life without him. I realized then that I had been surviving my whole life, not living. And in this dangerous house, with this dangerous man, I finally felt alive. Slowly, I tore the plane ticket in half, then in quarters. The sound was loud in the quiet room.
Juno flinched.
His eyes snapped to mine, wide with shock. Amara, he warned, do not do this out of pity. Do not do this because you feel you owe me. I let the paper fall to the floor like snow. I stepped closer to him. I don't owe you anything, I said firmly. And I don't pity you, Junho. I think I might be the only person who actually sees you. I placed my hand on his chest, over his heart. I felt it beating fast beneath his suit. You offered me safety out there, I said. But I don't want to be safe if it means being invisible again. I want to be here, with you. The restraint he had held onto snapped. He let out a ragged breath and wrapped his arms around me, pulling me hard against his chest. One hand tangled in my hair, tilting my head back. Then his mouth was on mine. It wasn't a gentle kiss. It was desperate.
It was a claim.
I kissed him back with equal force, holding onto his lapels. When we finally broke apart, breathless, he rested his forehead against mine. His eyes were dark and burning with a promise. I cannot promise you peace, he whispered. I cannot promise that the world won't try to tear us apart. But I promise you this, Amara. As long as I breathe, nothing will ever touch you again. You are mine now. I looked up at him. I had traded my freedom for the protection of a Korean mafia boss. It was a dangerous bargain. But as I leaned into his touch, feeling his arms wrapped around me like steel bands, I knew I wouldn't trade it for anything. I know, I whispered back. I'm yours. Outside, the rain began to fall again, tapping against the glass. But for the first time in my life, I wasn't cold.